Good morning, everybody. Today we're gonna have a look at JavaScript modules. So as your app or project grows, you probably don't want to have everything in one file. So this is why we need a way to organize our code into separate files usually. Now there is 3 different ways of doing that. One is the way we used to do it, which is not really up to date anymore. Well, maybe sometimes people used to use that, but overall, it's not very often anymore. But so we're gonna have a look at how it used to be, and then next up we're gonna have a look at the front end, which is basically always using ES modules, so the standardized way. And with that, usually we're going to use a bundler. But by now, the browser also knows how to handle ES modules by themselves. But yeah, more on that later. And then lastly, we're going to have a look at how Node.js deals with modules, and that is CommonJS. There's a way to enable ES modules, but that is still experimental, so probably that's not what you're gonna want to use for the time being. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna open up a browser. Well, there we go. And then also gonna open up Visual Studio with just a bare bones structure. Here I'm using the React starter. Just because I already have a bundle there and have the app set up, an app set up, so we can just get into it. But before we get into the app part, let's just have a look at the legacy way of doing it. So back in the day, we would have an HTML file, and then we would have a couple of one or more JavaScript files. So I'm just quickly going to create 2 files here. BJS. Let me just console log A and console log B to see if that's working. And then we're going to load those in here. Okay, there we go. And then we want to open that. Well, there's nothing on the page, that is expected. Let's give it a relative path maybe. And that is still not working because I forgot the extension. Okay, there we go. We do have both console logs, so that means our browser loaded both of the JavaScript files, and here in the network tab we can see both of the files. Perfect. Now, if you define a variable here, const age, maybe, I don't know, 20, and then we log the age, you would expect that this variable here is only accessible in that file, right? But this is not the case. So if we try to console log age in B, we would still be able to access that. So once we have any variable on the top level, we're going to be able to access it throughout all the JavaScript files that have been loaded in here. So as you can imagine, there might be a lot of confusion going on, and that's why people came up with the module system, the 2 module systems in JavaScript. But yeah, so this is the way it was done in the beginnings, maybe not until recently, maybe. But yeah. And then you would always have to be careful not to have any naming collisions, so you couldn't name a variable the same here, otherwise you would potentially override it. Obviously in a function, the function scope is still isolated, so you wouldn't be able to access the function scope, but that's got nothing to do with modules. Okay, so let's move on to the front-end part, which, okay, I'm gonna undo that. And here, remember, this is nothing special. I'm gonna simply load a React app. So this is in the index.js. And then here's our application JS. Maybe I'm gonna start from the index.js because we don't actually need the application for now. Okay, so to start, just gonna npm run dev, and then we should have a development server running, hopefully in a bit. Okay, there we go. So that's old stuff, as I said. Don't worry about that too much. We're mainly gonna be working with the console for now. Okay, so let's have a look. So we have this index.js here, and we're actually importing stuff already. Importing and exporting is basically how you deal with modules. So here we do have default imports. I'm going to show you in a second how that looks like. But yeah, we're loading one element. In this case, this is a React component. Here we do have an object. Well, yeah, an object, and here as well an object. But yeah, you can export and import whatever you want, basically. And then in that other file, you can do whatever you want with it. So in the case of the application, let's just quickly check that out. There's a little stuff going on here, but then we go export default application, which means we're exporting our application component, right? Now, with that, there's only one thing that we can export with the export default. Let me maybe create something, age, well, yeah, let's call it age.js, whatever. And then gonna say const David is 20, right? Export default David. So we're gonna export one thing only, that is David, or David's age maybe. And then I can go ahead and import David's age from age.js, right? Now, note that with default exports, you don't have to match up the naming here. You can call this, if that's a default import, right? You can call this variable. You're basically creating a new variable here. This doesn't have to match what you called it here, right? And that's what I'm doing here. I can call it the same, but chances are in a different file, I might have a different naming scheme or naming context. So I might be confused what David would be, right? So I would rename that to David age. And then let's just log that. And there we go. We do have David age working. Now, this is all fine. But as I said, you can only import one variable if you're using a default import or export. Right, so let's go here again and let's see if we can actually have multiple variables that we transfer from the age.js to the index.js. So in addition to David, maybe we want to export Maria's age, and Maria is 21, maybe. The way we do that is we simply say export Maria, right? And instead of export default, export const, this should do the trick. Okay, yeah. Okay, there we go. So maybe one more thing. With the default, you cannot export default in one line. That's going to give you an error. So you have to create the variable, and then in a separate line, you can export a default. With the const, with a normal export, apparently it is that you have to do it in the same line. Now there is two more things that you can do. You can, well, with functions, for example, you can export default function. Well, actually, it's the same thing, right? Because it doesn't matter if we have let's get David's age, right? And then we return David. We can go export default get David's age. Oops. Something like this. Or you can export default all in one line. So with functions, it does work. With variables, with normal variables, you have to go into the next line. Why that is, I actually don't know. But yeah, this is how it is. Okay, so let's see. Let's say we do have, let's say we have 3 people, right? And we're gonna have Philip. And Philip is, maybe he's a bit older, he's 35. Okay, so yeah, we're exporting one default, David, and then we're also exporting Maria and Philip, and then let's try to access them here. So remember, if you don't put anything here, just a name, well, a variable name, you're gonna create that variable with that name for the default export. If you want to access the other exports, they're called named exports, not default exports, you're gonna have curly braces, right? So you can import, for example, Maria or Philip, right? Oops. And then we're gonna console log that. There we go. And we have all the ages. Now here, with the named exports, well, they're called named because you have to give the exact name. If you don't do that, it's going to look for something named like that in here and potentially wouldn't find it. So let's say if I try to import Steven, it's not going to find Steven because there's nothing called Steven that we're exporting here, right? So, but I can rename existing variables. So I could say Maria as Steven, and see VS Code does highlight as the keyword as, because this is the renaming operation. Yeah, and then we can, Maria is going to be undefined, and then Steven is going to have the value of, there you see, Maria is undefined, but Steven is going to have a value. And well, in my example, maybe it doesn't make too much sense to rename people, but still, I think you get the point. And then let's see, there is one thing. You can also access the default export in here, in the named exports part. And that is by calling it default, and then you would have to rename it. So default as default age maybe. And then this is, I think that was David's age, right? So that way you can access that all at once. But yeah, you would probably do it like so. There's a case, we're gonna get to that in a bit, but yeah, usually that is how it works. Now, let's say you have a bunch of people in here, but you don't want to all separately import them. So one way of doing that is to just import everything. So import ages from, as ages. So we import everything and assign it to one variable. And then we can log the variable and we have everything. And here, remember again, or see again that there's a default variable. So we have our default, and then we have Maria and Philip that have the same name. And yeah, then you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, maybe one more thing, just how you would use that. Oftentimes, you're gonna have one, well, how do you call that? Maybe a grouping file. So let's see, let's say we have a string JS, and then we have a capitalize function, function capitalize, and then what else do we have? Maybe remove white space. Okay, something like this, right? And then we export those, and maybe you also have a default function, check string or whatever, return true. You would have to implement something here, right? And then you would have all your different files, having some functions or some variables, doesn't matter. And then you would have, in our case, utils one grouping file that does nothing else than importing and exporting all of the submodules, right? So here I would import, well, capitalize, remove white space, capitalize, remove white space, and then default as check string from string, right? And then I can access, let's say, import check string from util. Oh, well, okay, not quite. I forgot one thing. Now we're importing it, but we're not exporting it again, right? So we do have to export these from this file again. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to import it from that utils file, or utils folder, or utils index file, right? So I would have to go ahead and then export, capitalize, capitalize. Okay, should work like this. Yeah. Well, okay, there we have that problem. But yeah, that was just an intermediary step. Actually, how we're going to do that usually, I'm sure there's a way to do that, but I'm not getting the syntax right at the moment. But how you would usually do that is not importing it and then exporting it in two different steps. But actually, we can export the imports. So the stuff that we're importing into this file, we can immediately export it, right? Because this binding file should, or this grouping file, I don't know how to call that, should not have any other responsibility, right? So you don't want to have any other function declaration here, but rather you do want to simply export your functions from all the different files in here so that you can import everything from utils, right? And then, yeah, you should be, okay, actually I had a typo here, but doesn't matter. Well, let me just do that. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's just see if that's working. So I have an actual implementation here, remove white space, and then this gets funneled through the index file, and then in our working index file, let's say, I can import that, and then I'm console logging remove white space, something, ABC, and then we just, well, let's see if that's more visible. Well, it's not really more visible. But yeah, it's removing the white spaces. Hopefully you can see that. In the end, it doesn't matter much, right? Because we did see that we can call that function from here, and we imported it from the utils, which imported it from the string utils file. Okay, well, this wraps up the front end side. Okay, maybe one addition. So here I am using Parcel as a bundler, which bundles everything together into that one index.js, and I can load that into the HTML. There's a way without the bundler, and you simply call you simply declare the type module, and that way you wouldn't need a bundler, but chances are you need a bundler anyway because the browser doesn't know what to do with React syntax, or I guess Vue or Angular or whatever else there is. You would have to transform that. So yeah, you need a bundler anyways. But there is this way of not needing a bundler if you're using vanilla JavaScript. Vanilla meaning no additional framework or whatever. Yeah, keep that in mind and play around with it if you want to. Okay, well, now we're done for good with the front end, I think. And let's move on to Node.js. Node.js, just real quick, we're gonna be working in the terminal now for a little bit. Just gonna remove that again. Okay, terminal. Just gonna need Node.js. I've got version 12. There's version 14 and 15 right now, but yeah, if you have any version of Node, that's fine. And then we can get started. So yeah, let me create a new folder, example. And we're also gonna have an index.js and just gonna run that to see if that works. Sorry. Okay, there we go. We do have our console log. That's perfectly fine. And now let's try to do something similar that we did before. And as I said, Node.js is mainly using a different module system, which is called CommonJS. That has a different syntax. The concept is fairly similar, but yeah, it is a different syntax than the ES modules. Eventually, I would guess that Node.js is going to adopt the other way of dealing with modules, but for now it is CommonJS. Well, there again, later on, let's have a look at how we can actually use ES modules in Node.js, but for now it's CommonJS. Okay, so let's create an age.js again. So we're gonna say const David is 20. I think that was his age. I always forget these kind of things, but yeah. Okay, and then how we export something in CommonJS. Maybe one thing I forgot is, I deleted the index.js. That was not my intention, but just one addition. Usually if you import something, you would give it a relative path, meaning a dot slash something or 2 dots or something like that. If you don't have any dot or slash, it's gonna look in the Node modules folder. So here I'm importing React. That means the bundler is looking inside the Node modules folder and looks for a React folder, and that is right here. And then it's going to go into the package.json and see what the main file is. Here it's index.js, so it's getting this. And then there's more stuff. But yeah, just one addition, and this applies to both ES modules, so front end basically, and CommonJS, which is Node.js. Okay, back to CommonJS and Node.js. So we have our age.js David, and we want to bring that into our index.js so we can use that. And the way we do this is to call module.exports equals David. And here you can assign anything that you want. Right now we're simply assigning an integer, 20. So we're simply exporting one variable. And then we can go ahead and say David or David age is required. This is the keyword for requiring, to import something. So require, and then from age.js, and note you don't need the extension usually if you're just dealing with JS files, JavaScript files or JSX files. And then let's log that. Well, we do have an empty is it maybe module export? Well. Okay, well, that was interesting. I don't know why that was. So I think, yeah, maybe I didn't save the file. That's possible. Okay, yeah, back to the actual thing. So we're requiring the content of that file and then logging it. And here we're just assigning David's age, which is 20. Now here, same thing. This is kind of like the same thing as the default export, but in CommonJS there's only one export. There's only the default export. So to get around that, we can use an object, right? So let's say we have const Maria is 25, and then const Philip is 35. And then we simply create an object and assign the keys with the values, right? And the shorthand form is just like that. Okay, and then when we import, this is ages now, right? I always try to match the variable name to its content, and since we're exporting multiple people or ages, I would call that ages. Let's run that again, and then we do have all 3 ages. Yeah, and this is how you import and export stuff with CommonJS, or easier to remember, just a Node.js. This is how you do it. Now, maybe you do want to grab one age or maybe all of the ages in immediately without having to access ages.david, for example. And the way to do that is to use destructuring. Now, I'm going to probably do a video on destructuring later on, but just, yeah, as a quick sneak peek, just quick intro, you can simply have the curly braces because we're exporting an object, and then you can type in David, and that way you're getting David's age only. And yeah, still works. We still have David's age. And then if you want to have all other ones, so let's say Maria and Philip, you can type that. But maybe you just want to use David and want to save all other ones in an object still, you can use the rest parameter and then just go ages again. And then you're going to see that, well, let's maybe switch the order here. Okay, so here David is its own variable, and then ages contains all the other ones, right? So yeah, you can just plug one or pick one, and then the other ones are left in that object if you still want to use them later. Yeah. Okay, I think this should be pretty clear, and you can apply the same concept here again. If you want to have a utils folder, you can create utils index.js and have that require and export everything from the sub modules there, so you don't need to have so many requires for each of the individual sub modules. Okay, yeah, so this is it. Let's quickly check out how we can enable the ES modules. So the import syntax, import export syntax instead of the require syntax. And for that, I'm gonna go to nodejs.org, which is the official documentation. And then, yeah, let's go to the LTS version. LTS stands for long-term support, so that's usually the one to get. And then, okay, well, it's here already. So as you can see, there's the CommonJS, what I just discussed, and then the ES modules. ES modules, if I scroll down, table of contents, if I scroll down, you see it is still experimental for Node.js, but you can enable it if you want to start playing around. I personally do not like to do that because yeah, I just want to have supported features only, stable features. So if I push something to production, that nothing breaks. But yeah, if you want to try it out, then go for it. There is multiple ways. You can call it MJS, the file. So we would not call that JS, but rather MJS. And then you can put type module, I think, in package.js, or have a flag when running it. One other way to do it would be to use something like Babel node or something like that. But yeah, all of that, in my opinion, is not really recommended, I would say, at this point. Just stick with the require syntax, and then you're going to be good to go. Okay, well, yeah, this concludes our video for today. Hope you found it helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or how you liked the video, and then see you in the next one.